Yeah, yeah.
Right. And this journey started, Scott, to be very frank with you, to be very productive personally, right? And I think you speak about that a lot in your talks. I mean, where does one start? Is it tools? Is it mapping out everything point by point? This is what I'm going to do from Monday to Friday. Weekends is for this. How does one start that? And then we can sort of deep dive into it before we close it off.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the things that you're right about, though, is that where does that energy come from to be productive? And it usually comes from the idea that, well, I'm working on something hard that if I'm not productive, I won't be successful at it. And so, this kind of goes back to this doubt, uncertainty, working on ambitious things. I think that if you don't have that, then productivity, like a lot of the stuff, like what, especially what you're talking about, like, okay, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to do this for 4 hours and I'm going to go to my job. And then like, that's hard to do, right? Like it is much easier to just sleep in. So you have to have some reason why you're doing it. And so I don't think anyone can give you that reason. I think you have to find it for yourself. But I think it's important to ground it in this context of like, if you don't have that, then a lot of this advice just seems like an unnecessary like hardship. And then I think where do you start? Well, I don't know. I feel like it depends on the person. I really like Capture Systems is a good place to start. Like Getting Things Done is a good book to start reading. I think just because getting organized is often a precursor to actually making forward progress on the goals. Like if it's just all in your head, it's very difficult to stay focused. So that's a really useful thing, is that you've got a calendar, you've got a to-do list, you've actually got some systems. So getting the to-do list items onto your agenda for the day. And then you're like, okay, this is what I'm working on right now. Correct. I think those are important. I think having again, the scaffolding, the routines, the habits, they are very important for getting it kickstarted, right? They're not going to be correct. They're going to be very generic. They're not going to be the thing that leads to a specific accomplishment. But obviously, if you have limited time in the day and you're waking up early and you're getting 2 hours of like unbroken concentration every day, if you can do that steadily, then that definitely adds up. So I think that's also another thing that makes a big difference. And I think those are good places to start. So I think starting with habits is often very helpful for people because it's also entirely under your control. So a lot of what I think the difficulty can be pursuing ambitions and goals is there can be a bit of a confidence trap that like you haven't done or you haven't succeeded in a lot of things before. And so there's a little bit of an uncertainty and anxiety about like, oh, okay, well, is this actually going to work out? Whereas can I just wake up at, 6 a.m. every day is something that like, that's 100% in your control. You can do that. Right. Whereas can I make $1 million in 5 years or something is like, maybe, but I mean, that's not something that you can guarantee is going to happen unless there's like a person who's going to cut you $1 million check at the end of some process. It's going to depend on a lot of factors. And sometimes you're going to be lucky and unlucky and there's going to be trial and error. Whereas can I wake up at 6 a.m. every day is something that you can actually do. So I think often starting with those goals that are entirely under your control. So like getting a gym habit, getting set up with a productivity system, maybe it's getting things done. Maybe it's, Cal Newport has a good one, time block, I think it's time block scheduling. I'm forgetting what he's calling it now. And, I had one called Weekly Daily Goals, which is a sort of super simple system that I used a lot when I was in university. And so getting started with a system like that, getting started with exercising, getting started with, waking up a bit earlier. These are all good, like, I call them like hygiene habits. They're not going to get like the result on its own, but they just create a kind of clean productivity environment where you actually like, it's easier to get things done. And I think they also are very important because if you've successfully installed habits, if you've successfully set up these things, it does give you some more confidence. Like, okay, actually, if I set a goal and I work at it, I can achieve it. I mean, that sounds really basic, but it's not a belief that you think about rationally. It's something you feel, right? So people who are successful in life, I think often kind of maybe look down on a little bit of self-help ideas because it's obvious to them, right? Obviously setting a goal and working at it, you can achieve it because, successful people do that all the time. Correct. But if you've not had a lot of that personal experience, it is a bit of a question mark to you. And so, sometimes I will have readers who will email me things where like, that's clearly the problem, is that they don't have this confidence in themselves yet, that they're able to do things. And yeah, so it can be one of those barriers. And so I think starting with habits is often very useful because it is 100% under your control. So there's not going to be these other messy external factors. Whereas like, I want to start a successful business. You can work, like going back to this uncertainty idea, you can work as hard as you can and you pull out all the stops and still fail at it. I mean, that's life. Like sometimes that happens. And so I think those are less helpful for building that confidence, just because, you work really, really hard and then you fail at the goal through no fault of your own. And then your brain learns this kind of reward signal of like, well, it's pointless. Why bother trying? So I do think starting with those good habits can be helpful, especially if you don't have a lot of experience with it. But I mean, it is just one step in the process. It's not going to be the end point either.
Absolutely. Absolutely.